Welcome to The Explainer. You know, in the world of ad tech, promises are, well, they're cheap. You've got companies claiming they can engineer your attention and save the planet, sometimes in the same breath. So today, we're going to give you the tools to cut through all that noise, to separate the truth from the hype, so you can really see what's going on behind those big promises.
Okay, let's kick things off with a pretty stark observation from someone who's actually been on the inside. And this quote, man, it just nails the central problem we're going to be digging into today. It's this constant battle, right, between real, genuine creativity and just the relentless financial pressure that drives so much of the ad tech industry. It's a world where you've got this glossy, shiny exterior of innovation, but underneath, it's often a much grittier, purely money-driven reality.
You hear the slogans every single day, right? Promises of unmatched performance, incredible engagement, and yeah, even saving the planet. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and really investigate that gap. The gap between the polished sales pitch and the often messy reality of how things actually work. So where do we start? Let's dive right into the language they use.
All right, first up, the seductive sales pitch. We're going to look at what you hear versus what it all really means. Let's talk about the language itself. I mean those carefully chosen slogans and phrases, the ones that are just perfectly designed to grab your attention and, let's be honest, your budget.
Okay, check these out. We create and amplify unmatched online experiences that drive powerful business outcomes, engineered for attention, designed to engage, outcomes without compromise. I mean, they sound incredibly impressive, don't they? They're meant to sound super authoritative, super innovative, but at the end of the day, this is very, very carefully crafted marketing copy. So the real question is, what happens when we actually translate them?
Okay, let's get into it. Section 2, Decoding the Hype. We're translating that marketing speak into cold, hard reality. This is really where we get to the core of it, right? What do these terms actually mean in practice? Like, what's going on under the hood? So, we're going to decode some of the most common claims you'll run into, and let's start with that big one, engineered for attention.
So, the claim is engineered for attention. Sounds great, but the reality? Well, it's really about optimizing for time on site. And how do they do that? Often with aggressive pop-ups, heavy-duty tracking, and layouts that are just tuned to maximize how long you stick around. So when a company says this, you got to realize it's not necessarily about the quality of your attention. It's almost always about the quantity. It's about keeping you there, whether you really planned on it or not.
Okay, what about designed to engage? The reality here is that this usually means they're using behavioral psychology, things like constant notifications, those streaks that keep you coming back, sticky user interface, all designed to create habit-forming hooks so you don't leave. And you really have to ask yourself, does this kind of engineered engagement start to feel a little bit like what we call dark patterns? Those design tricks that get users to do things they never meant to, like signing up for something or sharing way more data than they were comfortable with?
And this one, oh, you'll see this all the time. A big, juicy number like plus 70% attentive seconds. Wow. But the reality is, this is almost always a relative lift, based on a metric the vendor themselves defined compared against some baseline in a pretty limited test. It's not some absolute guarantee. So, the absolute crucial point here is to be skeptical of big numbers without context. A 70% lift sounds amazing, but it's a relative increase. You have to ask, a 70% lift compared to what exactly? What was the baseline? What were the test conditions? The details matter a lot.
All right, Section 3, the reality of greenwashing. And we're going to be separating commitment from claims. Now, this same decoding lens we've been using, it is absolutely essential when we look at sustainability claims. Why? Because the language can be just as vague and, honestly, just as misleading. A lot of the time, the very same tactics used to sell ad tech are being used to sell a company's green credentials. So let's figure out how you can spot a genuine effort versus just simple greenwashing.
So, is saving the planet just another piece of fluff? I mean, it's the critical question, isn't it? And the answer is never, ever in the slogan itself. It's in the data. If you want to find out if a company is actually serious about sustainability, you have to look for hard, concrete evidence, something that goes way beyond just some nice-sounding words on their website. And here you go. Here's a simple 5-point greenwashing test you can use. So, you ask yourself, 1. Are there specific, measurable targets with third-party audits? 2. Does it cover the full life cycle, or are they just buying some offsets? 3. Are they being honest about the trade-offs, like what gets worse to make something else better? 4. Is executive pay actually tied to hitting these goals? And 5. Are they transparent? Are they publishing public data and progress reports even when they miss their targets?
Look, if you can't get clear answers to these 5 questions, you're probably just looking at a slogan, not a real strategy.
And this quote really says it all. If penalties for failure exist, it's more than fluff. This is the ultimate litmus test, right? It's all about accountability. If a company has actual meaningful penalties built in for failing to meet their own green targets, that's when you know their commitment is probably more than just talk.
Okay, so Section 4, inside the ad tech machine. Why does this gap between the pitch and reality even exist? We've seen these misleading claims in ad tech, we've seen them in sustainability, but why? Why does this happen in the first place? Well, a lot of it comes down to the internal structure of these companies and the incentives, which are so often built for speed and volume, not for genuine innovation.
You'll see this pitch all the time, redefining creative delivery, but the reality is often just an assembly line. This is such a classic move, right? They wrap what are pretty standard, high-volume operations in the language of innovation. It's kind of like slapping a gourmet label on a fast food burger. It sounds like they're breaking new ground, but behind the scenes, yeah, it's a very, very different story. And this table just breaks down that systematic disconnect in a really powerful way. I mean, just look at the pattern here. The role is pitched as a creative technologist, but in reality, it's a technical producer. Compensation is pitched at market rate, but in reality, it's 30 to 50% below market. The success metric they talk about is creative quality, but what they actually measure is throughput and velocity. And the goal? They say it's innovation and craft, but really, it's just about escaping commodity pricing. This is not a system built for innovation, it's an assembly line designed to produce something as cheaply as possible. So, what are the telltale signs of this model? Well, here are the red flags that tell you an organization is built for that high-throughput assembly line, not for real creative excellence. You'll see job ads that stress speed and templates, not authorship, performance reviews that score velocity over the actual concept. The so-called creative direction just comes from A/B tests. Wins are only ever reported in terms of revenue. And this last one might feel a little familiar to some of you. Credit always flows up, but blame? Yeah, blame always flows down. Okay, last section, your ultimate defense toolkit. We're going to talk about the questions to ask and the proof you need to demand. So with all this in mind, how do you protect yourself from all this hype? Well, the good news is you are not powerless. Here's a really actionable toolkit based on everything we've just uncovered, designed to help you build a solid defense against all these misleading claims.
Look, just starting with the right questions immediately puts you in a position of power. It changes the whole dynamic. So the next time you're in a pitch, don't just nod along and accept their claims. Ask for the specifics. Which specific KPIs are you optimizing for? How is attention earned without resorting to dark patterns? What data is being collected and who actually owns it? These are the kinds of questions that separate the real deal from the empty promises fast.
And this is non-negotiable. Demand the proof. Don't just accept their glossy case studies at face value. You've got to demand to see the engine under the hood. So, number 1, ask for definitions. How exactly are metrics like attentive seconds calculated? 2, what are the baselines? What is the control group you're comparing against? 3, what was the methodology? Was it a randomized split test? What was the sample size? 4, where does this actually apply? On which sites and formats does this lift even hold up? And 5, for sustainability, demand the carbon math. What framework was used? What are the assumptions? Bottom line, make them show their work.
And then we get to the key contractual guardrails. And honestly, this might be the most important part. Get these protections in writing before you sign a single thing. A verbal promise is not a strategy. So, you want to define specific KPI targets in the contract. Mandate an independent third-party measurement source, not just their internal reports. Detail the test design like a 50-50 holdout, and absolutely include a make-good clause that spells out exactly what happens if they miss those KPIs. Think of this as your insurance policy against all the hype.
And here's the bottom line. This is the fundamental shift in mindset you need to make. You have to treat their slogans as hypotheses, and then your job is to test them rigorously. You're not just a passive buyer of some guaranteed product. No, you are an active investigator. You're a scientist testing a hypothesis. Their slogan is the claim, and it's up to you to design the experiment to see if it actually holds up under real-world pressure.
So when you hear their slogan, you have to ask yourself, is this a guarantee, or is it just a hypothesis that you're supposed to test? And that's really the key takeaway from this whole thing. The next time you hear that perfect, polished sales pitch, you'll know exactly what to ask and what to demand to find out if it's the real deal or if it's just another shiny object rolling off that assembly line. So the question is, are you ready to be the investigator?